You should love money. Let me be clear up front. I love money. I love having it. I love making it. I love what it can do for me. And I love what it symbolizes. Yet we also know that money evokes all sorts of nasty attacks. The amount of rhetorical viciousness about money is astounding. And it's tempting to engage in a little of that myself. Pope Francis, for example, leader of the Christian world, has angrily called money the devil's dung. Now, of course, dung is a polite word for shit. So keeping the alliteration, we could say that he thinks the money is Satan's shit. Yet he's also urged frequently that those with money not keep it for themselves, but rather spread it around more, especially to the poor, which to my sense of logic sounds like the Pope wants us to spread shit over the poor. So which is it, Francis? Money is shit and we should avoid it like the plague? Or money is good and we want the poor to have a lot more of it? Now, not only the strongly religious attack money. Semi-secular and atheist left-wing thinkers, from Rousseau to Marx to Thomas Piketty, are also very vocal in their attacks on millionaires and billionaires. According to the left's standard rhetoric, rich people are exploiters and takers and a drain upon society. And the richer they are, the more we should hate them. Thomas Piketty, for example, has recently claimed that billionaires are parasites on the economy and that they should be taxed out of existence. Notice the rhetorical red flags here. Parasites and out of existence. We know very well that Piketty's activist allies on the far left have a long and brutal history of more direct methods of taking millionaires and billionaires out of existence. So the rhetoric is extreme from many quarters. And of course, people will do bad things to get money. And some people will use money to do bad things. But money, or the desire for money, is not the problem any more than love or the desire for love is a problem. We can point out that some people will do bad things to get love, including lying and cheating and spreading false rumors and even assaulting the competition. And some people in love will do very bad things, including neglecting their other important commitments in life or being viciously and unjustly overprotective of the object or objects of their love. But love, we recognize, properly acquired, properly enjoyed, is truly one of the most important values in life. And the exact same is true of money. Let me start, though, positively with a personal note. Before returning to graduate school, when I was younger, I worked in construction in Canada for some years. My fellow crew members, they were all hardworking guys. There was an ethos of manly ruggedness that prevailed among them. Much beer was drunk, pickup trucks were driven, camping and fishing were practiced quite faithfully. Now, I am no slouch in the manliness department. Let's be very clear about that. But I'm also a bookish individual. And an anti-intellectual bias was also very strong with my construction co-workers. My foreman, for example, great guy in many respects, but when I told him I was going back to university, he was bewildered by that. Why on earth do you want to return to university? You could see it on his face. And this is a literal quotation from him. "Don't know why you want to hang out with all those egghead homosexuals, Steve," he said to me one day, shaking his head. So apparently in his mind, questionable higher education, was associated with some kind of questionable sexuality, just as in other minds, questionable riches are associated with questionable morality. And that brings us to our positive theme. Money is one of the greatest inventions ever, just as books are one of the greatest inventions ever, and for the same reasons. So to put this point provocatively, those who argue, as a noted author once did, that the love of money is the root of all evil, are, whether they realize it or not, in the same camp as those who disparage airy-fairy geeks and book learning. Here's why. Think about books. Books are collections of abstract symbols that represent ideas. We are each individually capable of having ideas and generating ideas, but the invention of written language enables us to record and transmit the ideas in ways that make all of us better off. Writing enhances our thinking in 4 ways: portability, storage, precision, and universality. Now that's a list. I'm going to go through them in more order and explain. So let's take some ideas, for example. Pick a famous person like Albert Einstein. Now, suppose Einstein had not been able to write his ideas down. How would the rest of us learn about them? Only by going directly to Albert Einstein or bringing him to us so that we can hear his ideas directly from him. But since Einstein did write his ideas down, his ideas become independent of him and portable. It's much easier to transport Einstein's books around the world than it is to transmit and transport Einstein himself. Now, another factor: Einstein is a cultural immortal, but physically he was mortal. Ideas stored only in his brain, they would have expired upon his physical death. But his written ideas have storage value indefinitely. So that's portability and storage value. Both of them come from written language. Written ideas can also be studied with precision much more easily. Right? With the texts in front of us, we can compare Einstein's physical theories with Aristotle's physical theories, Galileo's and Newton's. We can refine our interpretations and determine the degrees of truth much more accurately. So imagine trying to do that, right? Study Einsteinian physics and Aristotelian and Galilean and Newtonian physics using only talk and memory. Also, books enable everyone, right, in principle, to communicate with each other. Anyone who speaks the language can access the books and the ideas that they contain, and translations enable us all to cross any linguistic barriers. Now, all of those points about books are recognizable, and they feed into the claim that books are an amazingly powerful invention that elevate all of us who participate in written language and literacy, as we say, short form. All of those points about books hold precisely for money. Money is an abstract representation of wealth, right? Take a piece of paper that we call a bill, or it's actually typically a cotton linen blend and various other exotic materials typically. But take the piece of paper, or an American bill with $1 printed on it. Now basically, that piece of paper is indistinguishable from one with $100 printed on it. The only difference between the two is the abstract difference between 1 and 100. So it's an abstract representation of wealth. Now, of course, without money, we can make valuable things and trade them. Just like without books, we can think up ideas and talk about them. But consider the severe limitations of a barter system, right, which are the same severe limitations of an oral-only language. So suppose in a barter system we're sophisticated enough that we have a division of labor going on, some specialization, and therefore trade. Suppose you're raising chickens and I'm making boots, and I want a chicken, right? And so I offer to trade a pair of boots for a chicken. But you don't need any boots. So what do I have to do? Well, I have to find out what you do need. Say you want some wheat. Well, then I have to track down a wheat farmer who needs some boots and trade with that person. Then I have to bring the wheat back to you to trade for the chicken. Now, that's possible, but that's a lot of research time. That's a lot of transaction costs that are involved there. Obviously, the introduction of money makes everything a lot easier. Right? Money's universality. It means that we can all trade directly with each other. Another issue, problem that arises in barter societies. Now, suppose I could trade, say, a peck of wheat for your chicken, but I also need my wooden door repaired. And a carpenter comes by and offers to fix my door in exchange for the wheat. Well, which is the better deal? Should I trade the wheat for your chicken, or should I trade the wheat for the door repair? Right? We've got an apples and oranges comparison going on here metaphorically. Obviously, if we introduce money, right, with its uniform standardization of value comparisons, I can make the calculation of which is the better deal much more accurately. If I know that a peck of wheat is selling on the market for $4, a chicken is typically $5, but an hour of a carpenter's labor is typically $10, then it really is clear which is the better deal for me. I can allocate my resources more precisely in a money economy. Now go back to a barter economy. Suppose I want to do my week's shopping, or I want to take my family on a cross-country vacation, and I'm a bootmaker. Well, in a barter economy, then I need to haul enough pairs of boots down to the market in order to trade for everything that I want for my week's shopping. Or if I'm going on vacation, I have to haul a trailer packed full of boots all across the country in order to pay for everything as we wind our way across the terrain. Obviously, the portability when I go to market or when I go on vacation is much easier if we have money and I can just slip my money into my pocket and off I go. So portability of wealth and the ensuing time saving and transaction cost reduction is also an enormous value of money. Now, I'm a bootmaker, but boots go out of style, right? You're raising chickens, chickens die, right? Someone else is a wheat farmer, wheat, even when it's stored well, it rots eventually. So if my wealth and your wealth is held in physical commodity form, then my control over my financial well-being is limited by the survival time of whatever commodities I'm making, the boots in this case, or the chicken in your case. A chicken can live, I understand, for about 7 years, but a $5 bill, that can last indefinitely. And so money's wealth storage potential, right, it gives me and you much more control over our long-term financial futures. Now, the point here, then, in conclusion of this section is that respecting and even loving books is a very healthy attitude. And in parallel, respecting and even loving money is exactly the same, for the same reasons. Money enables us to trade with anybody. It enables us to evaluate each deal more precisely. It enables us to transport our wealth much more easily and to store it indefinitely. Precisely in parallel, books enable us to exchange thoughts with anybody. It enables us to evaluate ideas and theories much more precisely, to transport our ideas more easily, and to store them indefinitely. Of course, we know the ideas in books can be false. Some people are liars. Some people make stuff up. Some people have poor judgment about the distinction between reality and fantasy. We also know that knowledge can be acquired by immoral means, such as invasions of other people's privacy, conducting inhumane experiments on people, and so forth. Of course, the same thing is true of money, right? Money can be counterfeit, and it also can be acquired by theft, extortion, and other inhumane practices as well. But to be hostile to money on principle is no different than being hostile to books on principle. Being anti-book really is the mark of a cultural illiterate. Just as being anti-money, that should be seen as being the mark of an economic ignoramus. Books and money are tools. They're powerful and wonderful tools that are a credit to the inventive genius of the human mind. Take away those tools and you keep people stupid and you keep them poor. But make those tools, respect them, keep them clean, and you then enable people to become smart and rich. Now, that analysis does not satisfy either the strongly religious or the strongly socialist. So let's return to the money attacks and the most famous anti-money quotation and ask, is the love of money the root of all evil? First thing to notice about this claim is it has an astonishing breadth. Right? The love of money is the root of all evil. All evil? Really? Oh, you can understand, thieves and tax cheats and paid assassins, okay. All right, that's all evil in varying degrees, and money might be at the root of those things. But all murders? Aren't many murders committed in the heat of passion over something unrelated to money? Like, cheating spouses, or that guy who said the wrong thing to the slightly drunk guy at the bar? Right, what about wife beatings? Yeah, quite evil. right? But are the tensions between spouses always about money? Or what about child molesters? Hard to see how money has much to do with that perversion. All right, so rhetorical overstatement or not, there are three core objections to money that are built into this really granddaddy of all anti-money quotations. The love of money is the root of all evil. So let's tease out the three core objections. Particularly in religious conservative traditions, you find these, but they don't necessarily, at least not all of them, have to be religious conservative ones. There are parallels in non-religious traditions as well. But certainly one of the criticisms is the love of money is the root of evil, in the sense that some people will do very bad things to get it. Right. So what we're focusing on is the means or the methods that people will engage in because they want money. So the desire for money then is the motivator, and that then leads them to do various bad things, steal, defraud, and so forth. So this ties into the attacks on greed. Right? Greed is a motivator. We might think that greed is part of the human condition, and greed is tied to wanting stuff, and money enables you to get some stuff. And so that desire for money then exacerbates the greed, which is a sin, and money is therefore the root of evil in those cases. Now, another thing built into the love of money as the root of all evil is not so much how we get it or what we're willing to do with it, but once we have money, what we then do with it. And here we think of the standard religious attacks on self-interest. People, when they get money, the first thought, and usually the bulk of their actions, is to spend that money on themselves, to use the money to improve their own lives. That then is to say, they are acting on their self-interest, and money then is a tool of self-interest. But then what we have is people not acting out of any sense of altruistic duty or altruistic obligation. And part of almost all major Christian and other religious traditions is this obligation to charity, right? Whether you want to or not, your assets, your monetary assets especially, should be seen as belonging to other people, particularly those less well off. If you are keeping wealth for yourself beyond what you really need, you're engaging in self-interest, and that is, again, another sin. So money then is bad because it is a tool of self-interest, and it encourages people to be more self-interested. Now, a third kind of criticism, I think, is a deeper one in most religious traditions. That then is to say that the attraction of money, even the love of money, or even a cooler respect for money, shows that one has one's metaphysical priorities just wrong. This criticism goes under the materialism charge and strong forms of religion that have urged people to be anti-materialistic, right? The strong forms always say that one should not be at all interested in the physical world or in material things or the natural world, using those for now as rough synonyms of each other. Instead, one's focus should be almost exclusively upon the higher world, the non-physical world, the spiritual world, and then to the extent that you are then attracted to money and the things that money can buy in the natural world, you are metaphysically just way out of touch. So here, consider, for example, the famous quotation from 1 John, quote, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but of the world." So here what we have is a metaphysical dualism writ large. The supernatural world, that is the world of God. That's the higher world. That is where our total allegiance should be. And for whatever reasons, God does not love the world. It's not of him, right? It's material. It's physical. It's all about, right, lust and satisfying, right, naturalistic desires. And that's just not what God is. It's the opposite of him. And so if you want to love God, then you can't love the natural world, and vice versa. And that then is to say, from a strongly but generic religious perspective, reality is zero-sum metaphysically. It's an either or, right? To the extent that you love God, you shouldn't love the natural world. To the extent that you love the natural world, you can't love God, and God won't love you. We have a metaphysical value hierarchy, and money with its as a tool of the natural physical world include in a kind of a symbolic attraction to the physical world is a metaphysical violation. Now, the socialists, right, by contrast, many of whom are atheists, right, they will criticize money for being zero-sum, but not metaphysically, but for being zero-sum socially. And the generic attack here on money is to say that some having more money than others is an insult, it's an injustice, it's a taking, it's some sort of a failure with respect to those who have less money. And so the zero sum then is to be solved socially by a radical equality, making sure that everybody has basically the same amount of money and thereby the same amount of stuff that money can buy. Now, the strong equality and egalitarian distribution of money, typically socialists go on an intellectual evolution or odyssey to get there. Sometimes it starts, as with many anti-money attitudes, as being driven by a kind of envy, right? Those who really want money, they value money, but they don't have it. They resent the example of those people who have a lot more money than they do. And that, of course, can come out in some pretty ugly outbursts and even some rationalizations about not being interested in money and so forth. Now, I've covered money elsewhere in these Open College podcast series, so I want to just kind of set aside these bad faith pathological attacks on money and identify for now some apparently genuinely believed leftist types of attacks on money. One, let me give you a quotation from the novelist Balzac, right? Quote, "Behind every fortune is a crime." Right? The American populist politician William Jennings Bryan had a similar line, quote, "No one can earn $1 million honestly." And so here we have a fairly strong assertion of a zero-sum social claim. Necessarily, if you have more money than other people, a lot of money, you must have committed some sorts of crimes, right, against various other people. So your being in a rich position means that other people have been victimized inappropriately. There's no such thing as honestly making a fortune or honestly earning $1 million. It's always zero-sum, strong versus weak. Now then, of course, there's a fork in the road. You can say, well, maybe it is the case that money is zero-sum, and it's the strong versus weak in this money grab thing that we call life. And my sympathies, as I say, a more Nietzschean type of person stereotypically, are with the strong. And so, yeah, sure, every fortune is based on a crime, but I have no problem with that. Typically, socialists are on the other side of that divide. The acquisition of wealth is a crime. It is a zero sum, but they are typically compassionate toward or feel some sort of sympathy for those on the losing end, and so the zero-sum distribution offends their moral sensibilities. Now, this point is interesting. It's a topic for another discussion, but this behind every fortune is a crime is kind of indicative of much of the history of the left, that entrepreneurism and wealth creation and the possibility of positive sum transactions, that is often just invisible, entirely off the radar of people on the left. They do in many cases genuinely believe there's a fixed amount of wealth in the world, so then necessarily someone who ends up with more must be some sort of exploiter or some sort of strong predator or grabber. Now, another criticism, though, that typically comes from the left doesn't necessarily say that the creation of wealth or the development of a significant amount of money is necessarily a crime or necessarily a zero sum in its act of creation, but it focuses more on the resulting distribution. And this comes from the perspective of seeing the creation of wealth as a collective product. And so what that then means is people who end up with a lot of money, they are, right, through whatever business institutions or other social institutions, acquiring for themselves or appropriating for themselves a lot of money. What they're doing is appropriating more than their fair share. They're not properly recognizing that they didn't do it themselves, that really it was a large number of people in society and all of them collectively produced that wealth, and maybe you had a small part in that. But if you're ending up with significantly more wealth than a lot of other people who were involved in the production, that's an unfairness. So the colloquial phrase kicking around for the last few years, "you didn't build that," right, is coming out of this tradition. Right? So the point of that then typically is to say you should not be getting the lion's share of the wealth because your portion of the contribution is very minor, and so you're engaging in some sort of misappropriation or theft, since your so-called earnings really depend on the major contributions of lots and lots of other people. All right, so this is typically an invisibility about the creative potential and the creative productivity of lots of individuals, and not being able to grasp appropriately how we measure and allocate wealth. It's not to say that markets do it perfectly, obviously. They are an estimation method as well. But the idea that it's not possible, right, for some individual to vastly outproduce, to come up with ideas and institutions that justly enable that person, even when other people are involved, or even when that person is building on the efforts of other people, to justly deserve a huge amount of money relative to the amount that other people in the productive process are getting. That's often also invisible to the left. Now, a third one is a variation on this, and in some ways it's a deeper point than the other two, and that is that for many people on the left, there is something morally offensive about enjoying your wealth and enjoying the money that you've acquired, even if you have acquired it legitimately, while others are not enjoying wealth themselves. To generalize this, there's something offensive to their perspective about being happy and fulfilled and just enjoying your life while other people in other parts of the world are miserable and or suffering. And so obviously some people are in a position to really enjoy their riches while other people are struggling. And rather than just the normal amount of sympathy for the people who are suffering, this gets transformed into a dislike or a resentment of, or even a hatred of the people who are enjoying their wealth. So there's a kind of collectivity about human beings and the meaning of life and the enjoyment of life that is built into this objection. The idea that no one should enjoy more while some are still enjoying less. Nobody should have more food while others have less. Nobody should live in a big house while other people are homeless, and so forth. So you should not have a materially happy life while others somewhere are not yet able to do so. And so if you think of yourself not as, this is my individual life and I'm trying to live the best life that I can, and I expect, of course, that other people are competent and able to do so, and I want other people to live their lives, and I feel sorry for those who are suffering, and maybe I will help out here and there. But this is a stronger claim, that it's just wrong to enjoy your life while others are not yet in a position to do so, and what you have a moral obligation to do so is to put on hold your enjoyments, particularly your enjoyments of your wealth, and actually then devote your time and your wealth to getting other people in a position to enjoy their lives. Then and only then can you reap the fruits of your own labors for yourself. Now notice that all of these criticisms of money, both from religious conservatives, many of them traditionally on the right politically, and atheists on the left, many of them politically, all of them take us into some deep philosophical territory to which we will be returning again on Open College. Is the natural physical world good in its own right? Or is there really some sort of zero-sum opposition between the natural world and a supernatural world? Is wealth created in a positive sum way, or is it merely redistributed, typically in zero sum ways? Are individuals causal agents, including causal agents with respect to productivity and the creation of monetary wealth, or are what we call individuals merely active aspects or avatars of collectives and vehicles through which collective productive forces are operating? When we think of justice, do we think of justice as a matter of getting what you deserve according to your individual merits and demerits, your accomplishments, your mistakes, and so on? But I want to close with another anecdote, right, about the positive moral significance of money, another personal one. I remember when I was 9 years old, I stopped getting an allowance from my mom and dad. Usually my dad was the one who delivered the allowance to me each week. And I started going to work for my dad, who had a variety of businesses. He was a serial entrepreneur right over his career. So I started to do some small jobs, right, working for my dad. And I remember the very first week that we made this transition. I didn't get an allowance, or I got one allowance 1 week. The following week, I worked some hours with my dad and for my dad. And at the end of that week, I ended up getting about the same amount of money as I had received in allowance the week before. But this was a payment, and it felt differently. My dad gave me the money. I ended up with the same amount of money in both cases, but the significance of the difference was very clear to me as a 9-year-old. In the one case, I was receiving a gift from my parents. In the other case, and so that is to say, I was a child in relation to my parents. In the other case, I was an earner. I had earned, I had produced value, and the wealth was compensation for that. It was a step towards independence, right, by me not depending upon my mother and my father. And so that then is to say, as a 9-year-old, and I know there are millions of other young kids out there who learn this difference, right? It's important, but it's within the cognitive grasp even of children. There's a difference between receiving a gift from your mom and dad or anybody and earning your money by your own efforts. There's a difference between stealing things that other people have made and making something of value yourself. There's a difference between giving to other people as a charity case and investing. Might be the same amount of money, but investing in others for the development of their positive potential. I, like millions of other people around the world, learned and understood those distinctions. And a healthy morality of money does not lose sight of that, no matter how complicated the adult world of money, business, and economics becomes. Now, the core point here is about the moral meaning and the moral value of money is that productivity is essential to life. We need to make the things we need to survive. The only other option to productivity is just hoping that as an individual you're going to receive sufficient gifts from other people or to engage in active takings from other people, such as theft, conquest, rent-seeking, and so on. But notice that even being a gift recipient or a taker, both of those are dependent upon the productive. Before there can be gifts, there have to be things made that can be given as gifts. Before there can be thefts and other takings, there have to be things made by the productive that can be taken. It's the productive people who make everything possible. Money is a tool that we use to measure productivity, and it's a tool that productive individuals use to trade with each other. So we should honor and even love the productive, as well as honoring and loving the money that symbolizes their achievements.